Yo, what's going on, guys? Welcome back. Today we are doing a start bench cut debate. I'm joined by my guy Gavin from NBA Real Talk. How's it going, my man?
Oh, it's good to be here. Looking forward to it.
Yeah, we did last time on my channel, we did the 90s players today that would benefit the most. So, we're back, round two. But so today the players for the start bench cut we're kind of doing like a 90s, 2000s big man center type of debate. Very, maybe like not underrated players necessarily, but like kind of afterthought players that were still really good. And that is Antonio McDyess, Marcus Camby, and Al Jefferson. I feel like we were kind of even talking about this before we recorded. Like, they're a little bit different, so it kind of depends what you value. I guess we'll start like going backwards with who we're gonna cut. And I guess I'll give you the floor first. Which of these three are you going to cut, and why?
This is so interesting because they're like three guys who play pretty much the same position, but they're so different.
Mm-hmm.
So going off memory, what their careers were like, first person I think to cut is McDyess, just because of the problems he had in his career with injury. I mean, he's someone who was he got a bit of a Penny Hardaway type, Grant Hill type sort of, his career was going one way, then the injuries just chopped him down. And he was still a good role player after that. But I think just because the other two kind of reached at least somewhere around their potential, whereas McDyess just fell short. If this is a fictional world where we say, hey, that none of that ever happened, I'm probably going with McDyess just on the potential, but got to cut him in this instance.
Well, it's good. We already have a little bit of a difference here. I'm actually going to cut Marcus Camby, which might seem kind of crazy, because I would say he's probably the best defender of these three. He's also probably the worst offensive player of these three. Defensive player of the year, block champion multiple times. While all these guys kind of did bounce around team to team, he did bounce around probably the most. And, granted, he did have the longest career in terms of seasons. But I don't know. I think he's probably, I know you even mentioned like McDyess had a key injury and it kind of altered his career. But I would probably say that Camby had like the least consistency when it came to durability, because he had like many years where he just had injuries that he was suffering. Al Jefferson was
like 40 years, I think.
Yeah, like I think Al Jefferson, like he was pretty healthy most of his career, and I would say McDyess, like he missed a lot of like that 2-year stretch, and it kind of did change his career. But other than that, he was pretty healthy. Like he didn't have as many major nagging injuries, I guess, as Camby did over the course of like the back half of his career. But I think he's probably the best rebounder of this group, which also maybe adds to why it's confusing why I put him last. But I just feel like, with Al Jefferson and Antonio McDyess at their best, I feel like they could be like my team's A or B or C option, like as a building block for my team. And I feel like Marcus Camby, maybe he might be more valuable to his team at his best than these guys are, but I just don't think you can like build a team around Marcus Camby. You look like you're about to say something.
It's kind of like, I guess it relates more to modern ball, but refresh me if I'm wrong. Wasn't Marcus Camby the only one of those three guys who would shoot the occasional three? He definitely shoot from that like Tim Duncan range. I remember that.
I think he made a couple in his career. I don't know if I classify any of these guys really as shooters.
But Camby had that outside shooting game, whereas McDyess obviously for the second half of his career and was kind of that mid-range in and around the key, pop. And then, to be honest, it's just a random point to bring up to try to rebuttal. Couldn't Camby hit that top of the key shot? Even though he was, like you said, probably the least offensively gifted player of the lot.
Yeah, I think.
Allen Iverson's, but that happens. The tall guy who thinks on the basket, I guess.
I think maybe I valued peak a little bit for this too. I just feel like the best version of Camby maybe wouldn't stack up quite as good with the other two, but I don't know. Yeah, I guess that's why I'm cutting Camby. Unfortunately, for any Marcus Camby fans that are watching, but but I guess Yeah. I'll give you the floor though again. Who are you going to bench? Are you going to bench Marcus Camby or Al Jefferson?
I'm gonna bench Camby because he's the like I said, he's that defensive center. You rely on him for blocks and rebounds, which I think, you know, not going to a ramble about it, but especially in the modern NBA, I believe the more traditional center position is getting kind of devalued almost more than it should. Kind of like how the pump fake from the three and then dribble in for the easy two is no longer valued. It's like, no, you should sidestep and take the contested three. You know what I mean? It's like the guy who, yes, he can't work outside, but can get you rebounds and block shots. You know, that has sort of become so undervalued in today's NBA. And I know we're not necessarily doing this in a modern context, but just it's so important traditionally, and I would say even today, even though we don't see it as much, to have that guy, like I use the term, it's like, I want a guy on my team, as a Raptors fan the last 2 years anyway, I wanted a guy on my team who just averaged 10 rebounds out the womb. You know what I mean? The guy who was born to rebound the basketball, especially at the end of games. And I know that with the three-point shot, rebounds are going longer and everything right now, but I think it's so incredibly important to have a guy on your team these days where it's like, I mean, dude, in my team, my example, I was ready to get Andre Drummond if I had to. You know what I mean? Like, it's such a lost art to have that guy who you can rely on for those boards, because at the end of games, you need to get the ball back. When you make that team miss, you need you need to get that ball back and go back down to the other end when you're down 2, down 5, whatever the case is. And it's such a game of momentum, especially at the end of the game. And so much of keeping or getting that momentum or stopping the other team's momentum is just getting the freaking ball back when they miss a shot. So I'm benching Camby.
Yeah, I mean, I think that's fair. So for my bench, I'm going to bench Antonio McDyess. You know, he was an all-star, which neither of these other two were, and he was all-NBA once. And I think, like his peak was short-lived, and right around the start of his prime was when he had those knee injuries that kept him out for 2 years. Although I would probably argue that maybe from like 1998 to like 2001, maybe he had the best 3-year stretch of like anybody in this group. You could maybe make that argument. You know, at one point, like this guy led the Phoenix Suns, who won 56 games in win shares. Like, he was contributing the most to their success that season. Like, that's a huge accomplishment that neither of these other two guys had. And I know Camby's like, you know, made decent runs in the playoffs. He made it there a lot. Al Jefferson, not quite as much. But I just think that should be noted. You know, it's hard for me to start him just because after the knee injury, like we said, he kind of became a role player. You know, from Detroit, San Antonio, he just kind of like bounced around like place to place, and he was okay still. But it almost felt kind of like Grant Hill, I guess, like after Orlando in a way. And like when he would go to like Phoenix and the Clippers, and like we all knew he wasn't the same in those places. You know, I was a little tempted to put him below Camby, like, because of that. But again, I also valued just them at their peak form, their best. I don't know though if Camby, you know, at their best, I don't think Camby would touch McDyess. And honestly, you could argue maybe Al Jefferson wouldn't either. But I just think I have less confidence in McDyess long term, and I guess it's a little still contradictory, because you can make the same argument pro Camby and against McDyess. But I will say, I think maybe the one thing that maybe is the most reasonable as to why I could have him on the bench is that he played the most games coming off the bench of any of these three in the NBA. So
basically, he was on that Pistons 03 or 04. He was on that Pistons.
No, he wasn't on that team, but he was on the team. It was like a year or two after, yeah.
Okay, he was a year or two after. Okay, so when they were still good anyway, they didn't win the championship. Still going to conference finals. And if memory serves, he wasn't starting for them. Wasn't he playing? Wasn't he kind of like a 6-man type role? He was hitting all those short range jumpers and stuff.
Part of the time, yeah. And like he kind of had the same thing with San Antonio. Like I think in 2010 when they were the 2 seed, he started most of those games. Then in 2011 they were the 1 seed, and I think he came off the bench most of the time, other than like 15 games.
Anyways, because I didn't follow his career that closely in the beginning. I just knew when he came back on those Pistons teams, it was like this big deal. It's like McDyess is like finally kind of healthy again. Well, how many, he's not going to be the same player, but what's he going to give us? And I just remember him, being a solid off the bench player. So the same way you could justify Camby being on your bench because of what he's going to bring in. I mean, Antonio McDyess, even after injury, not a bad choice for a sixth man or seventh man coming off the bench to hit some shots and give your team some offensive energy.
Yeah, I agree with that. But yeah, I'll send you the floor first. I know we both have the same guy coming up here, but who is it of these three do you think you're gonna start?
So, yeah, I'm going with Al Jefferson. He had, I would say, a short peak, but he was just pretty dominant. I'm not gonna lie, he wasn't a player I paid a ton of attention to. But I remember he was he on Charlotte? He was on some garbage teams.
Charlotte, Minnesota, Utah.
I was gonna say Minnesota and Utah. I remember him just like he was doing the 20 and 10 thing like nobody's business. And it was more of an offensive force thing. But it was just like he was like, put it this way, when you think about a center, a lot of what you're looking for is consistency, right? What do I know? What do I know I'm going to get out of my center every night? And Jefferson was just such a beast. I mean, from what I recall, those teams, maybe a couple of them might have made the playoffs, but basically all those teams that he was the beast, he was the number one guy. Not necessarily because of his fault. I don't think they were good teams, but they never went very far. But he's that guy where he had, I would say it was probably somewhere around the 5-year stretch where he was basically an all-star caliber center. You know what I mean? And I think that's more than we can say for the other two for the most part. It's basically what it comes down to.
Yeah, I think he probably has the opposite argument of Camby, and this is what we said, like what you value most. He's kind of the opposite, where I would say he's the best offensive player, and he's probably the worst defender of the three. Although I wouldn't say he was a bad defender necessarily. Yeah.
Three, I would say worst. Yeah.
And he did make All-NBA one year. I think it's kind of funny because like he probably has the least amount of accolades of these three, and like and maybe McDyess is the second least. You could argue Camby has the most, and like I kind of put him reverse order. I just think that's kind of how close this is. But I just think with him, you're gonna get the most consistency over those years. I think like from 2006 to 2016, he averaged like almost 20 and 10 over that stretch collectively. And I think like I was checking like their PERs, and like his is like Camby and McDyess are pretty close, and like Al Jefferson's is definitely like, I think he's like 3 points higher than them in that regard. So definitely one of the more efficient players. I think like, and I was kind of inspired to even like bring him into this discussion because of like a recent tweet that I think Derek Favors put out, where it's like, prime Dwight Howard, who would you rather go to for a low post bucket? Would you go to Jokic? Would you go to Embiid? And would you go to prime Al Jefferson? And I mean, that seems kind of wild to just throw him in that discussion.
Yeah.
But
yeah, Al, he was such a banger. He still had something that, but like, he was just that guy you trusted physically down low. Like he could hang with whoever. Whoever was guarding him, it wasn't going to be a problem just because they were bigger or this or that. Like he knew. Yeah, like I think that's the thing. He just had that sort of wide. He kind of reminded me of a little bit of who Rob Tractor Trailer was.
Yes. Yeah.
He I believe he passed away a couple of years ago. But just those guys, they're just. I'm gonna sound like Barkley on a bad comment. Those girthy guys that could just bang you down low. You know what I mean? So I mean, yeah, it's interesting we both come at that choice because we're talking about three centers that were a little bit slept on for various different reasons. But we both agree we just want that physical guy down.
Yeah.
He's just such a center. You know what I mean?
And you mentioned that too. That's another thing as well, is that like I was checking how much these guys weigh. Because you think of Camby, you think of like he's kind of slim. You think of McDyess, he's kind of slim. Both those guys were listed at 220 pounds. Then you go over to Al Jefferson, he's 290 pounds. So like he's almost like a quarter more their weight. You know what I mean? So like,
what was he? He could have been taller than 6'10". I want to say Al Jefferson was like 6'9".
I think he was 6'10", and I think McDyess was 6'9", and Camby was 6'11". I'm not 100% on that, but
pretty sure Camby was basically a 7-footer.
Yeah.
I think Camby came in the league, and it was probably when they were still like measuring them in shoes, but he was like 7'2" when he got drafted. I think.
Wow. Yeah. I think it's also funny too, because like you think about McDyess and Camby. I was looking at this. Like McDyess was the second overall pick in '95. Camby was the second overall pick in '96. And then Al Jefferson, you got to go a few years over, like in 2004, and he was picked like outside the lottery. So I just think like that's also like, and I kind of mentioned this a little bit when I did a start bench cut with like Dwight Howard, Yao Ming, and Ben Wallace, and like I kind of gave credit to Ben Wallace for that as well, because like the other two guys in that regard are the number 1 overall pick, and this guy was undrafted. So that's just like also a tale about hard work, I think. So
yeah. Yeah, no, I mean, the thing about Jefferson, not saying anybody doesn't earn anything anytime in the NBA, but Al Jefferson was one of those like guys, like he earned all the points.
Yeah.
He was just down, physical, banging around, getting rebounds, getting in close. Like his game was so not pretty, you kind of had to respect it. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
It was all about just grinding the ball through the mesh.
Yeah, no, I feel that, but yeah, I mean, I guess those are.
Funny how we doing agreed on the last one. I think that's pretty funny.
That's always the best way to do it, like have a little bit of disagreement, but in the end we still agree on something. But yeah, I mean, so I guess those are our lists. I don't know if you have any final thoughts you wanted to get off your chest before we wrap it up.
All 3 players deserve a little more respect. They're not really disrespected, but like they're slept on. They're not even, I wouldn't call them underrated. They're just guys where people should acknowledge. If you know basketball, you're a bit better player than like it sort of shows. You know what I mean?
Mm-hmm.
Al Jefferson especially, because he basically just averaged. It'd be easy to write him off as another one of those, oh, well, he's just, a diamond in the rough on a bad team. But, he worked hard down there in the post. You know what I mean? Like, he earned his stuff. So, great players to bring up. Can't wait for the next one.
Yep. Again, appreciate you joining me for this discussion. But I think that's going to do it for us. Hope you guys enjoyed. Thank you guys for watching. And we're out. Peace.